is a task for all leaders to establish bridges of cooperation beyond their inner circles. The other group Gideon faced as he exercised leadership was the men of Ephraim. We find them in the last verses of chapter 7 and the beginning of chapter 8. Please read with me in Judges chapter 7, verse 24 and 25. Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against Midian and take the waters before them, as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan." So all the men of Ephraim were summoned, and they took the waters as far as Beth-barah and the Jordan. Verse 25. They captured the two leaders of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. After the battle started, Gideon didn't want the Midianites to escape to their country. He knew they were approaching to the territory of Ephraim, fleeing from the attack of Gideon's men. Then Gideon requested cooperation from the people of the region of Ephraim. They were not part of the 300 men enrolled in the army. The strategy was well synchronized, and the men of Ephraim captured the two leaders of the Midian army. Here we can get another important lesson. Leaders need to be open to requests or to receive cooperation or support beyond their inner circles. It can be organizations or institutions or people that share some mission, the same mission and the same goals. It is a task for all leaders to establish bridges of cooperation beyond their inner circles. However, there is another feature from the men of Ephraim. They felt upset with Gideon because he had not called them to join his army. Judges 8 verse 1 says, "Then the men of Ephraim said to him, 'What is this thing you have done to us, not calling us when you went to fight against Midian?' And they contended with him vigorously." Leaders, keep this in mind. Even though you do an excellent work, someone will criticize you. It is an important part in leadership to learn how we can handle this issue. What do we need to learn from Gideon about this item? Now please read with me chapter 8, verse 2 and 3. But he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? It is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" 3. God has given the leaders of Midian, Oreb, and Zeb into your hands. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. Let us look at the answer of Gideon state. 4 words in Hebrew language. "May a city attack him. What have I done compared to what you have done?" Then Gideon used a sort of poetic language when he said, "It is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" In other words, the leader of your work is much better than the best I did. And he emphasized his answer by repeating the concept God has given the leaders of Midian or Ephraim into your hands. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? An inappropriate answer could have originated in a national conflict, but Gideon applied an important principle. A gentle answer turns away wrath. Gideon teaches us that the leader needs tact to solve internal conflicts, inner conflicts. Some conflicts start just as a misunderstanding on an issue. Avoiding it is a wise step in any circumstances. We just read that even though the men of Ephraim were summoned to help Gideon at the last moment of the battle, they cooperated with him to achieve the goal of the nation. However, it is not always the case. This time let us see another group of people, the men of Sukkot and the men of Penuel. Let us read together Judges chapter 8, verse 5, 6, 8, and 9. Gideon said to the men of Sukkot, "Please give loaves of bread to the people who are following me, for they are weary, and I'm pursuing Seba and Salmunna and the kings of Midian." And listen now, the leaders of Sukkot said, "Are the hands of Seba and Salmunna already in your hands that we should give bread to your army?" Then he went up from there to Penuel and spoke similarly to them. And the men of Penuel answered him just as the men of Sukkot had answered. And so he spoke also to the men of Penuel, saying, "When I return safely, I will tear down this tower." Leaders can find people who are not always willing to cooperate. Gideon asked for food for his men, and it is sad to see the lack of sensitivity of these leaders. They deny easing the burden of the battle for Gideon's men. It is a blessing when you have a leader who treats accomplishments as important, but as not as more important than people and their basic needs. Finally, let us see the last group of the men that challenged the leadership of Gideon. Now is the turn of the men of Israel, the leaders of the entire nation. At the end of the war, the kings of Midian, Seba and Salmunna were executed. Gideon achieved successfully the goal. Verse 28 says, "So Midian was subdued before the sons of Israel, and they did not lift up their heads anymore." Although Gideon faced internal and external challenges, he achieved the goal. So the leaders of the nation recognize outstanding features in Gideon to lead the entire nation. Let's read verse 22 of chapter 8. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, both you and your son, also your son's son, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian." You have delivered us from the hand of Midian. The Israelite nation during the Judges' time was a theocratic society. It means God ruled over the nation. Sometimes God designed leaders or judges to lead some special commissions in the nations. That judge needs to submit to the Lord, who empowers the chosen one to accomplish his mission. The supernatural divine intervention was fundamental to all achievements. How could Gideon defeat the Midianites army of 135,000 men with only 300 in his army? It was only possible with God's intervention. Unfortunately, in asking Gideon to be the king of the nation, the men of Israel recognized him as a major factor in the battle's success. The men of Israel explicitly said, "For you have delivered us from the hand of Midian." I think it is a problem for some people, the glorification of the achievements or the glorification of men instead of the glorification of God, who provides the success in accomplishing a task. Leaders need to be conscious that the ultimate factor of their success and their abilities come from above. Men are only an instrument in God's hands. So be careful when you receive praise or when you accept the glory that really belongs to God. It is detestable to God when men attribute to themselves the glory that only belongs to Him. Fortunately, Gideon was a man who had a clear consciousness of his role and the role of God in leading the divine mission. Gideon replied to the men of Israel in verse 23, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." What I think after my reading, that it was not right that the people would want Gideon to be their king just because of his success in the world. They need to recognize the Lord as their ruler because He was the one who gave the victory. As God's commissioners, we need to recognize the Lord as our King because He delivers us, He helps us in our battles. We are an instrument in His hands, but He is the master and the user of the instruments. Gideon defeated the temptation to receive an credit that belongs to the Lord. He put aside the risk of becoming proud and arrogant because of his success. Be careful in thinking that Gideon was trying to avoid responsibilities in leading the nations in practical terms. We can see in verse 28 his active role as the leader of the nation in the following years. The verse says, "And the land was undisturbed for 40 years in the days of Gideon." So Gideon served the nation as its leader for almost 40 years. But Gideon understood well the role of a leader in accomplishing a task in God's enterprise. Gideon also remembered well what God said to him about his calling. And it is very important in the context of leadership and accomplish a mission. In Judges 6, verse 15 and 16, Gideon asked God, "O Lord, how shall I deliver Israel?" And God answered in verse 16, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat Midian as one man." Here God established a fundamental principle in relation to accomplishing a divine mission. When He wants to perform a mission, He does not come in person, but he chooses a man or woman to put on his or her shoulders the divine word. So it is God who puts his mission or divine word on our shoulder. That is the reason God says, go in this your strength and deliver Israel. But the line below says, I will be with you. So in order to accomplish a mission, God empowers a man or woman to make his purpose possible. It is clear God uses men's abilities, and in his hands is the perfect combination to carry on his purposes. God emphasizes that concept many times in this account, Judges, and particularly in the book of Judges. For example, in Judges 7:7, he states, I will deliver you with the 300 men who lapped and will give the Midianites into your hands. In verse 15, Gideon repeats the same to his men. Arise, for the Lord has given the camp of Midian into your hands. The soldiers also understood the sense of interdependence in God's power in human effort. In verse 18, they said, a word for the Lord and for Gideon. It was not God alone. It was not the 300 men alone or the isolated word of Gideon. Rather, it was a combination of God and men that brought the victory. The beauty of accomplishing God's mission is a convergence of many commissioners, of missionaries, with no other than God as a central figure of prominent leaders. The success of God's word comes from the greatest partnership of all times, God and man. All is possible under God's direction. Ellen G. White wrote in the book Undecided of Ages, the power of omnipotence is enlisted in behalf of those who trust in God. To conclude, leaders should be conscious that on their paths they will find people who work along with them, people who work for them, or people who work against them. In this session, we have revised these lessons in order to make our journey in life more insightful. To remember that God reigns is to recognize that He is the one who delivers us in all our modern battles, as we exercise leadership in our communities or organization. That is the fundamental premise in the path of a Christian leaders. Finally, when God makes us leaders, He will see us through by partnering with us, thus creating a tandem that will successfully complete His mission.